Hi friends, thank you for taking time out of your week to spend a little with me. I appreciate you. For the case this week, I asked my Patreon pals to vote, and they chose a cold case that had some recent developments. So, as always, I ask you to join me as we remember Karen Snider. Karen Edna Neves was born on July 29, 1948, in Indiana, to parents Russell and June. She was one of 6 children to the couple. Growing up, Karen was described as quiet but a likable girl. She attended Lowell High School. It was at Lowell High School where she met Paul Snider. Paul Marshall Snider was born on June 5, 1943, in Hammond, Indiana. The two were enamored with each other and the relationship moved quickly. Both Paul and Karen knew they wanted to spend the rest of their lives together. So, on August 21, 1965, in Cedar Lake, Indiana, Paul and Karen became the Sniders. The couple moved to Calumet City, Illinois, just 23 miles outside of Chicago. They found a quaint 2-bedroom home located in the 400 block of Wilson Avenue, which was just down the road from Paul's parents. The young couple settled into their new life together. Paul found work at the local rail yard as a crane operator, and Karen was a homemaker and soon-to-be mother. Just months after her 18th birthday, Karen gave birth to a baby girl the couple named Paula. Life for the Sniders was blissful. On November 12, 1966, Paul went to work as usual, but the day was off. He called home sometime after his shift, and when Karen didn't answer, he grew nervous. He then called his parents, Frank and Elizabeth, and asked if they would go to the house to check on the girls. The Sniders returned home that evening from a trip to Buffalo, so they decided to stop by their son's home before heading to their house. They arrived around 8:30 p.m. Paul's parents knocked on the door, but no one answered. Thinking she might just be busy with Paula, they opted to head home and give her a call instead. After waiting some time, they tried to phone Karen, but again, she didn't answer. Paul was informed that Karen couldn't be reached, so he left work early to check on things back at the house. When he pulled into the driveway of his home shortly after 11 p.m., he knew something was wrong. The blinds in the front window were drawn shut, and the porch light was turned off. Typically, Karen left the porch light on for Paul since he returned home at night. As he opened the door, he noticed the television provided the only source of light. In front of the TV was Paula, who was 2.5 months old at the time. She was sound asleep in her bassinet, safe and secure. The program listing for Saturday's television lineup was left open on top of the set. Knowing Paula was okay, Paul turned his attention to his wife. He made his way up the darkened staircase toward the couple's room. He attempted to turn on the light, but it wouldn't come on. So instead, he turned on a lamp in the bedroom. With the room illuminated, Paul saw the horrible scene. The bedroom showed signs of a struggle, with blood being present, and Karen was on the floor with multiple stab wounds. Paul quickly made his way back downstairs, where he called for help. Knowing police were on the way, he grabbed Paula and went outside. Paul shouted, "Help me! My God, somebody help me!" His parents arrived on the scene shortly after. His mother, Elizabeth, armed herself with a flashlight and made her way to her daughter-in-law to render aid. However, after seeing Karen, she knew there was nothing she could do to help her. Sadly, Karen had passed. Elizabeth kept her husband and son out of the house because the scene, as she described it, was just horrible. When the police arrived, the scene was secured. Karen was found to have more than 100 stab wounds to her chest, back, and neck. The room revealed that Karen fought for her life. The footboard of the bed was splintered, and the room was splattered with blood. The phone in the bedroom was ripped from the wall. Investigators believe the attack started downstairs near where Paula slept. There was blood smeared on the staircase wall leading up to the bedroom. Per the investigation, a break-in did not occur. Everything was locked from within. It appeared the attacker attempted to gain entry through the rear of the house. A broken window was found leading to the basement, and they also discovered jimmy marks gouged into the frame of a back door. It was believed Karen either knew her attacker or she opened the door and was overpowered by a stranger. A trail of blood was discovered, and it was believed to be the attackers as a result of a cut sustained from the smashed window. The trail ran from the broken window and around the side of the house to the front door. They believe this is where the attacker gained access to the house. Police collected several fingerprints, blood scrapings, a screwdriver found in the kitchen, 2 pairs of slacks, a washcloth, a bedsheet, and a light bulb. All were submitted as evidence. The clothing items, washcloth, and bedsheet were discovered in the bathtub downstairs and believed to be used by her attacker to clean their hands. The light bulb was discovered on the floor of the bedroom, and police believed her attacker unscrewed it as some sort of tactic. No murder weapon was discovered at the scene. The blood evidence was submitted for serological testing, where it was confirmed that 2 blood types were found at the scene, type O, which belonged to Karen, and type A, her attackers. The fingerprints pulled from the scene were of no value due to a lack of distinguishing characteristics. Karen was taken for an autopsy, where it was determined no additional forms of assault took place. Her time of death was placed between 4 and 6 p.m. Based on the wound characteristics, the medical examiner determined the stabs were created with a stiletto-type knife. Everyone close to the situation was interviewed. This included Paul, his parents, their neighbors, and friends. Investigators applied heavy pressure to Paul, making him their main focus of the investigation. But once blood test results were returned, Paul and others were cleared as suspects. From the interviews, it was discovered that Karen was afraid of living in the city and often told friends she wanted to move back to Cedar Lake to be closer to her parents. The couple's neighbors, John and Rosalie Lindebarker, explained they didn't hear or see anything, and they would have known because of their dog Nikki. Nikki was a small black-haired dog who barked at the slightest noise. Rosalie stated when Nikki barks, she always checks, but that night, Nikki didn't make a sound. In fact, they were unaware anything happened next door until a reporter called inquiring about Karen. In addition to Nikki, Cindy, Paul's parents' boxer, was tied up in their garage, and much like Nikki, she barked at everything and everyone. Per Elizabeth, Cindy barked when anyone approached the house, and her bark would wake the whole block up. But if she did bark, no one nearby heard her, and no one saw anything or anyone out of the ordinary. Another odd occurrence was a missing table lamp. In the living room, Paul stated they had a matching set and one was missing. This particular detail puzzled police since they couldn't understand why this, of all things, would be taken. Karen's blue leather wallet containing $50 was also missing. Anyone associated with Karen Snider was questioned, which resulted in several potential suspects. 4 detectives were placed on Karen's case to work around the clock. The persons of interest were investigated one by one until they could be crossed off the list. Originally, it was down to 6 potential suspects, but as the interviews proceeded, it became clear only one of these suspects could potentially be their attacker. The man labeled as prime suspect number 1 remained unnamed to the public. The police chief stated they didn't want to overlook anything and they wanted to gather all evidence to present a strong case. Once these steps were completed, they were going to name the man. According to detectives, the prime suspect came under scrutiny when he attended Karen's funeral. He was a friend to the couple, having worked with Paul for some time at the rail yard. The prime suspect participated as a pallbearer at Karen's funeral, and it was during this event that many noticed his hands were covered with scrapes and cuts. Because of this, the prime suspect and his wife were interviewed regarding his whereabouts on the evening of November 12th. The prime suspect admitted that he had been in the Snider home 2 previous times, but that night was not one of them. And as for his wounds, he explained they came from a fall. On November 12th, prime suspect stated he went to a bar and decided to head home after several drinks. Since he was intoxicated, he opted to walk home. It was during his walk he tripped on a tree stump. He hit his head and cut his hand on a jagged piece of wood. The prime suspect then explained his wounds continued to bleed, so he sought medical treatment at Calumet Region Clinic Hospital before returning home. Police checked the records at the hospital, where it was confirmed primary suspect received treatments. When asked about primary suspect's blood type, it was determined he was a match to the attacker. A witness corroborated that the primary suspect was seen that night at the bar, but the particular location was near the Snider home. His wife also confirmed that her husband was at the bar that evening. He arrived home late and drunk. His hand was stitched up and he had a deep cut on his forehead. Coming home late wasn't out of the ordinary for him, though. His wife stated her husband was an alcoholic. When she asked about his wounds, he appeared nervous and replied it was nothing, before removing all of his clothing and throwing them in the washing machine. The prime suspect was arrested in connection to the murder, but due to a lack of evidence, they were unable to charge him, so he was let go. The investigation continued with police interviewing people for years to come, but sadly the case stalled due to a lack of leads and was eventually declared as cold. After the loss of Karen, Paula and Paul moved into his parents' home. As she grew, Paula was aware that something happened to her mother, but she wasn't sure of the details. At 5 years old, she always heard the stories from other children about her mother because of their parents. But by 11, she decided she wanted to hear the full story, so she asked her father. Paul eventually remarried to a woman named Connie, who helped provide a motherly figure to Paula. Her family did the best they could to shield her, and she credited her strong family support to prevent her from being harmed by the situation when she was young. As previously mentioned, police spent a lot of time focusing on Paul, which placed a lot of unnecessary stress on a grieving husband. He spent a lot of time trying to get Karen's case solved, and worked on it until his death. Paul passed in 1989 when he was 45 years old. Karen's parents, specifically her mother June, was distraught over the lack of answers from the investigation. Her mother recalled how her telephone rang about 4 p.m. the day her daughter was murdered. She explained she answered it, but no one was on the line. She believed in her heart that this was Karen trying to call for help. Sadly, they too passed before getting answers. Her father, Russell, in 1973, and her mother, June, in 1977. As Paula grew older, she also advocated for her mother's case alongside her aunts and uncles. She tried to raise attention to Karen's case, but due to her own growing family, she had much less free time to focus on it. Thankfully, she and her remaining family wouldn't have to wait much longer for answers. In December of 2022, a man later identified as Kevin Seeley contacted a tip line to inquire about the murder of Karen Snider. Kevin explained he heard about the case often while growing up because of his grandma. Due to his pure curiosity, the police explained they would look into it, and Karen's case was officially reopened. The phone call launched what would be a 16-month investigation where the evidence from the case was reanalyzed and suspects and witnesses were re-interviewed. During this process, they happened upon the primary suspect. This man was identified as James Barbier. James was now in his 70s and at the time, the only suspect to be arrested in connection to Karen's murder. He was now living in Missouri. They met with James in March of 2024 to interview him and collect a DNA sample. Luckily for investigators, the case was well documented and the evidence preserved. The clothing and bedsheet were sent to the Illinois State Crime Lab for analysis. The results determined the blood from the attacker was a match for James. After confirming what couldn't be done in 1966, a warrant was issued for his arrest. James was taken into custody from his Missouri home on April 29, 2024. Allegedly, James seemed like he knew this day was coming. He was charged with the first-degree murder of Karen Snider. After 57 years, the family finally received answers. When Paula received the news of James' arrest, she said out loud, "Mom and Dad, we got him." According to Paula, her father always suspected James was the culprit, but they couldn't prove it. In a statement to the press, Paula stated, "I'm still on with my family a journey for justice. It's not over, but we are closer than we ever were in 57 years. Karen's brother Bill Neves also commented on the matter. "I can't imagine seeing him sitting there and for 57 years he was free. My sister has been in the ground. It's time to make sure he pays for what he's done." James was released on May 2nd and allowed to return home until the trial, with max pretrial conditions, such as being unable to leave Missouri or Illinois, surrendering both his passport and any firearms he owns, and being required to report in person and on the phone twice a month. He was allowed to return to Missouri pending the trial due to his age and health. These factors preclude him from being considered a real and present threat under the terms of the Pretrial Fairness Act. In addition to this, the state is also not petitioning for the death penalty. James' most recent court appearance was on May 21, 2024. Currently, no recent developments have been reported beyond this last court case, and the legal proceedings are still ongoing. Karen Snider was laid to rest on November 16, 1966, at the Chapel Lawn Memorial Gardens in Cherryville, Indiana. Hi friends, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about this case, so leave them below and we can chat about it. If you found this to be informative, please consider giving the video a thumbs up to let YouTube know you want more from me. And lastly, if you're not subscribed yet, you should, because we would love to have you under the ash tree. Unfortunately, I do not have much in the way of developments about James' case or even the outcome of the May trial. I'm going to keep my eye out for anything that comes up about the case, and I will update as I have it, but for now, this is where the case ends. I only hope for her family's sake the trial isn't long and drawn out, and they can finally close this chapter. Thank you all again for joining me and for the Patreons voting to cover this case. I hope you all have an amazing week ahead of you, because you deserve it. But for now, we must part ways. So stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, friends.